Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is a ProdPad Product Experts Fireside series that we're running here today. And joining us today is Teresa Torres. We're going to be talking about what to do when your leader still wants dates on your roadmap, which is a hot topic. I know it's a hot topic because it's a thing that comes up every time I talk about timeline roadmaps and why you need to ditch them and moving to the now next later roadmap. And I invited Teresa because she wrote an article on this exact subject. I think this was last October and it went wild. I'm sure her inbox blew up. My inbox blew up because she wrote it. And so had to get her on here to chat about it because people are still trying to find ways to convince their teams to get off the timeline roadmap and onto something that looks more like a now next later. So we're going to be talking more about that, but to give you a sense as to what these webinars are all about, this is a series of webinars. I recognize a lot of faces from, or a lot of names from these from the audience here, from previous webinars that we've run. We run these things monthly, so every month we bring in a different expert. Teresa has actually joined us before to talk about her continuous discovery habits book and talk about continuous discovery in general. But we've also had all sorts of different experts joining us, and we've had them all recorded. And it's always a mixture of either presentations and firesides, and it's always with a focus on these experts and what they bring to the table with from their experience. It's a focus on the content, the learning, the sharing, and bringing some light to their experience and the questions that we have for them. So today is going to be recorded. It's always one of the number one questions we get. And so you will be able to share it, you will be able to rewatch it, and you will have a chance to ask questions. So get your questions in sooner rather than later, and that way we're able to pick them up as we go. Before we jump into the meat, I want to talk to you about what it is that we do here at ProdPad. So many of you probably already know what we do, which is great. Thanks for all your support. If you don't know what we do, start your trial today. So ProdPad is a tool for product managers. So welcome, product managers. You should be trying this out. It's a tool for road mapping. It's a tool for idea management and feedback management. It's a tool for collecting all the insights as to what it is you could be building and mapping them all out to understand where it is that you should be taking your product and informing the people around you as to where it is that you should be, where it is that you are going. Myself and my co-founder Simon built it because we were product managers ourselves and needed tools to do our own jobs. And so it gave us this sense of control. It gave us organization. It gave us and our teams transparency into the product management process. And now it's being used by thousands of product teams around the world. So you can try it for free. And we even have a sandbox mode that we've built. And that sandbox mode is a place that is pre-filled with example now, next, later roadmaps and OKRs. And you can see lean experiments and all sorts of stuff filled in. So you can play with it, you can move it all around, you can share it with your colleagues, all sorts of stuff, and see how it fits with your processes. And our team is made up of product people, so we would love to get your feedback once you jump in there and give it a try. A little highlight on one of the things that we've been working on is automations. One of the key things that ProdPad does is reduce the grunt work for you. And what ProdPad automations does is it's like if this, then that, but for inside your ProdPad. So when an idea reaches a particular state, then automatically update it to do something, or when a piece of feedback from your customer does something, then update it to go do something else. Lots of different pieces that you can connect together within ProdPad to create different pieces of automations. We're seeing some really creative uses of it. So by all means, give it a try and let us know how it works for you. So jumping into, as I promised, the meat of what we're going to be talking about, but I want to introduce Teresa. So Teresa, everyone say hello to Teresa Torres. I've known Teresa for years. This goes back to our days hanging out at Mind the Product conference and her getting involved with that. She's been a speaker on the Mind the Product stage. That was a huge wow moment of seeing that. She absolutely blasted that one, but has also been involved with things like workshops and some of the smaller events as well. So we've had a chance to hang out in various cities as she's gotten involved there. She's also an internationally acclaimed author, a speaker, a coach. She's a master of continuous discovery. She helps product teams make customer-driven decisions daily. And she's coached hundreds of teams from startups to global enterprises and taught over 12,000 people through the Product Talk Academy. So definitely pick up her book, Continuous Discovery Habits, and read her blog on producttalk.org. It's an amazing resource that I've been going through and referring back to for years now. So everybody say a big welcome to Teresa. Teresa, thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks, Janna, and thanks for the lovely introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining here today. And as I said, one of the reasons why I invited you along today was not just because you're always a blast to chat to, but you wrote this article last October about how teams can convince some of the different people on their team about moving away from timeline roadmaps. So what spurned that? Was it a particular situation, or was it a particular frustrating client, or were you getting the same questions I was? Tell me where your head was when
Yeah,
you wrote that.
so I track all the questions that I get over a wide variety of whether it's events and Q&A or through email or through the blog, on social media. We actually have a database of over 1,000 questions now, and we keep track of
Brilliant.
how often they come up. So this is a little bit like the equivalent of like customer feedback, managing support tickets. What are the big
Of course it
trends?
is. Yeah.
For me, it's questions, right? So what are people asking? Regardless, I've been blogging for coming up on 13 years now, and the question database is not getting smaller. I feel like the more we talk about these topics, the more specific and the more like it just generates more and more
Yeah.
questions. And what we do, when I say we, because I have a team that supports me on this, like I just can't do it all myself anymore. But we look at like, we have an Ask Teresa series on Product Talk where like roughly once a quarter, maybe every other month, we look at what's the question that's like bubbled to the top. So that's getting asked the most often. And this roadmap question comes up so much. I run a community for people putting the discovery habits into practice. It comes up there over and over again. It comes up on almost every webinar I give, on every talk that I give. It's always in the form of like, Teresa, this is great. I read the book. I really want to work the discovery habits, but I have a problem. And my problem is this. My stakeholders, whoever they may be, it could be the CEO, it could be marketing, it could be sales, it could be their boss, like it literally could come from anywhere in the organization, is saying, yeah, but I need a 12-month roadmap. Or I need to know exactly what you're building this quarter. We're doing
Yeah.
capacity planning. I need to know what your team is building this quarter. And a lot of these are like vestiges of an old mindset, of like this old traditional way of working. And a lot of our stakeholders are starting to embrace outcome-driven development and empowered product teams, but they don't realize that all these other like vestiges need to fall by the wayside for us to really get all the way there. And so I just wanted to write about how do we help our organizations move fully into this world of outcome-driven empowered teams? And I think knowing how to evolve a roadmap in that context is really critical because it's one of the strongest artifacts that the rest of our organization relies upon.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a battle that I've been trying to fight as well. I think a lot of people know that I've been in this battle against timeline roadmaps for almost my entire professional career now, probably about the same 13 years that you've been
Yeah.
writing as well. And I often will talk about how to get away from timeline roadmaps, why now next later is a better way of working. And what I realize is that the questions that come up is, yeah, but what about this
Yeah.
particular situation? And yeah, but we have to do it this way because, or what about getting this particular stakeholder on board? And each of those is a situation in itself. And it's handling each of those different stakeholders that becomes the art of getting your team away from the way that they're working, that old school way of thinking, and into this more modern way of thinking. And bit by bit, I think those answers are coming out there, but I think we still need to continue shining more light on them. And you did a really good job in that article of highlighting some of the different ways that you might start bringing some people on board, comparing it to how sales and marketing works, comparing it to how to convince your leadership, for example.
Yeah, we can get into that a little bit. I think I opened that article. I think what a lot of people miss is we can't really solve a problem unless we fully understand both sides. Like, who is this a problem for? Who does it work for? And I think with roadmaps, that's particularly important. So I
Mhm.
think product teams understand why dates are a problem, and we can get into that. But we don't always understand why the organization wants dates or needs dates. So, like, if we talk about the first, why are
Yeah.
dates a problem for product teams? Well, if we want to do good discovery, we don't know ahead of time what's going to work,
Hmm.
right? Like if we really want to build something that's going to work for the customer, we can't put it even on a 3-month roadmap. Like I don't know until I start doing the discovery what this is going to look like or how it's going to work. I might throw it away altogether. In fact, if I'm doing good discovery, I'm throwing things away constantly.
Of
And
course,
so
yeah.
that's the first thing, is that like, and hopefully, like if there was any silver lining to COVID, and I even hate saying there was any silver lining to COVID, but if there was, it's that companies got a huge dose of reality of how unpredictable and uncertain the future is. And if you started January of 2020 with a 12-month roadmap, I'm going to guess by March of 2020, when the whole global economy slowed down, that your roadmap had to change.
Yeah.
And here's the deal, like we're not going to have a global pandemic every year. Let's hope to God we don't. But things do constantly change. And we're starting to recognize, like, we talk about agility, right? We talk about being reactive. We talk about being able to respond to what's happening in our market. We can't do that if we're locked into a fixed plan.
Yeah.
Now, the pushback I immediately get is, yeah, but what about regulations? Those have a due date. Okay, we are always going to have times where we do have to put a date on something. If you have European customers and it's pre-GDPR, you did not have a choice. You had
Yeah.
to implement GDPR by May of whatever year the deadline
May
was.
May 20, 2018. I remember that because
Yeah,
everyone had a date on the roadmap.
yeah.
And
And
you're
that's fine, right? Like we sometimes have to have dates on the roadmap. The problem is we put dates on the roadmap when we don't need them.
yeah.
And then we're creating this like death march where it's sprint after sprint. There's never a break. We're exhausted.
Yeah.
We learned something that's what we're doing isn't going to work. And if we raise that concern, it breaks the next 17 sprints and it puts the entire roadmap at risk. And so what do? We build the thing that we know is not going to work. And that's
It,
insanity.
Exactly, exactly. Like people assume, well, we have dates for some things, and therefore we must have to be able to put dates for everything. And you're penalizing yourself by putting dates for everything. Like reality is that sometimes you're going to have dates. So therefore acknowledge that and put the effort in to work to those dates, but give yourself the flexibility for the things around it.
Yeah. And I think that like making space for that flexibility is really key, because if we don't, we now know, I think it was, who was the big A/B test? Was it Optimizely? One of
Optimize
the
is one of the
big,
big A/B testing companies. Yep.
yeah, I can't remember if it was Optimizely or if it was another one. One of the big A/B testing companies published a report years ago about what percentage of A/B tests fail. And it's like 80 to 90%. Okay, now let's think this through. We have I would say two broad categories of A/B tests. We have like marketing automation, this color versus that color, this headline
Hmm.
versus that headline A/B testing. But product teams tend to A/B test as a gate on feature release. Did the feature have the expected impact?
Yeah.
Okay, if we're seeing 80 to 90% failure rate on expected impact when we gate a feature, that means most of what we're building is falling short of our expectations. I would argue we can and should learn that earlier in the process, and we
Yeah.
should pull the plug before we do all the work. And that A/B test is just one source of data, right? Like we see this in the VC world. 90+% of startups don't get to a viable product, right? So we're slowly starting to recognize a lot of what we think is going to work is not going to work.
Hmm.
And so if we put a whole bunch of stuff on our roadmaps and we just blindly deliver, we're spending a lot of resources on things that are not going to have the impact we thought. And it's just really wasteful. And I
Yeah.
don't think we need to be doing that. GDPR like stuff comes along every once in a while. Most of the time, we should be giving ourselves time and space to figure out what's actually going to work for the customer.
Absolutely. And a couple webinars we ran some calculations to figure out what the cost is on some of these things that are failing, whether they work or not, but
Yeah.
just the pure cost that we often don't think about when it comes to, oh yeah, we'll just build that feature. And it runs into the tens of thousands, even for something quite small, when you consider the effort of your development team and your design team and your product team and the everybody else hacking away to make something a reality. So if you can actually just turn that into the product person did a spike, they just looked into it and decided that actually it wasn't going to be the right thing to do, that can save you the tune of 50 grand right there.
And it's not just the cost of building, it's the opportunity cost of what you could
Yeah.
have been building and like how
Yeah.
you could have reaped the benefits of if you had built the right thing.
Yeah.
So I think we just don't we don't think about it this way. It's so
Yeah.
easy to go about our day-to-day lives thinking this is a good idea. Of course it's
Yeah.
going to work. And the thing is, when we hear 90% failure, I saw on social media like yesterday or the day before, I realized I should not spend my weekends on social media. I'm working on it. We,
It's a weekend. Do what
someone,
you like with it.
yeah, exactly. That was like a little message to myself. Stop spending your weekends on social media. Somebody mentioned like, this has not been my, it might've been on Reddit. This has not been my experience as a product manager. Like, I don't see 90% failure. Okay, let's talk about this. It's not that 90% of what you're building is a catastrophic failure. It's that 90% of what you're building is falling short of the expectations when you chose to build it.
Hmm.
This is, I think, a really important distinction. First of all, most of us don't take the time to get clear on what are our expectations for this feature. We definitely don't document it. And then we definitely don't, after releasing it, measure the impact. So
Hmm.
we're not even aware that 90% of what we're building isn't working, right? But I challenge everybody who's listening, if you go through that exercise, is every single time you release something, you take the time to document, why are we building this? What's the expected impact? And then you actually instrument it and measure it. You're going to be very depressed at how often things fall short of your expectations. And I'm not telling you to do that because I want you to be depressed. I'm telling you to do that because that is the best motivation for
Yeah.
doing better discovery earlier in the process so that you increase your hit rate.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Absolutely. And that's actually something that ProdPad really helps with is we've built in space for every idea, every key result that you measure, every initiative that you put on your roadmap. There's a space in there for your target outcome and your actual outcome. So it makes it
Yeah.
really difficult to forget to put in there what your target outcome is. It makes it obvious if you've forgotten to do so. It makes it obvious you've forgotten to fill it out on the flip side when you finish something. And that's made a huge difference in our way of working as well as everybody else's way of working. So definitely something to bear in mind as you try to measure that. And would love to see everyone else's measures on where they come up on that 90%. Maybe we'll do some sort of state of the industry and see what that comes out
Yeah.
as with product features as well. Because I'd love to see what that comes out to.
I would be curious what percentage of your customers are using. I'm sure ProdPad is amazing and is opinionated
Yeah.
and steering people in that direction.
Yeah.
But I also know most teams aren't doing this, right? So
Yeah.
I'd be really curious about, do you have good data? One thing we tried to do was we did a benchmark survey and we asked people about their discovery habits. And one of the things we asked was about their outcomes. And I realized most people don't know how to answer that question. Like, and I even in the survey did a little bit of teaching, right? Like there was a splash screen that gave an example of an outcome, gave an example of an output, and then asked them, are you being asked to deliver outcomes? Are you being asked to deliver outputs? Are you being asked to deliver a mix of both, which is most
Yeah.
of us, deliver this outcome, but also build these features? And then, of course, there was a other category. And in the
Yeah.
other category, they had to fill in what it is they're being asked to deliver.
Yeah.
And the responses were shocking to me. Like, partly because like I live in this world of outcome
Yeah.
driven teams and I forget that like most of us are not actually in this world of outcome driven teams.
Yeah.
But like it was just really clear that like people don't know what an outcome is. And then the next question we asked, if they said they were being asked to deliver outcomes, we asked them, is your outcome tied to driving revenue or is it tied to reducing costs?
Yeah.
And then again, they had an other, and if it was other, they had to fill in a verbatim. And there was a huge gap. Like the majority of verbatims were either revenue or saving costs. They just couldn't make the connection.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to get good data on this because we're still learning the concepts.
Yeah. So this is really fascinating. We're going into a really interesting rabbit hole that could make I think this could be like
I know
another totally off topic, but I'm here for it. But I think we're going to have to put a pin in it. I am going to ask my product team to look into that data and see how people are interacting with the outcomes field. I know we had some data on it when we first launched it, but I haven't checked in on it recently. Now, this is also a hint for anybody who's using ProdPad now to get in there using it to get our stats up. Just playing the stats there. Obviously, that's
totally
bad product management right there. Everyone knows that, but hey.
It's your webinar. You get to make the rules.
Yeah, exactly. I like Wade's comment there. He said, trying to be the type of company that is outcome led. And this is actually what I see with so many companies out there. Everyone assumes that because everyone's read the book, Continuous Discovery Habits, everyone's read Marty Kagan's books, everyone's read all the books that are up there. They're all the thought leader books. And everyone assumes that everyone else is like that on the far end of the scale where everyone else is like, they're totally lean, they're totally outcome driven, they've got it down, and they're all trying to get there. The reality is that most companies aren't quite there yet, but they're
Yeah.
all like Wade. They're all trying to be there. They're all trying to make those improvements and get there. And that's actually a great place to be. As long as you're acknowledging that, hey, you know what? Last quarter, we didn't measure as much as we could. We weren't as outcome as we could. We're still hanging on to some of those timelines, but we're trying to work our way over. That's okay. The first step is acknowledging that, hey, we know that we're not ideal yet, but we're working our way over and we're having these conversations. We're turning up to the webinars. We're having those chats internally. You're making the steps that you should be doing. I talk to literally hundreds of product people all the time, every month probably, and no one is way over on this side where they're all like they've got it all down. You very rarely talk to the companies who are in the case studies of those books, but you also rarely talk to companies who are like the super old, the case studies on the other side of the books, like the ones who are the sinking ships. Most companies are trying to work their way back over that way, which is great to see.
Yeah, it's really funny. Like one of the criticisms I get usually on social media is like, nobody actually works this way. Like Teresa lives in the ideal world. And I want to get into this. I don't actually think anybody works this way. I will fully acknowledge that. I don't think there's any company in the world where every single product team is perfectly outcome driven. They have the perfect discovery habits and their leaders are like, yep, you figure it out. We're going to be hands
Where
off.
they've checked every last thing on the
Yeah,
box.
never going to happen. I don't even think it's ever going to happen. I think
Yeah.
you could ask me 100 years from now, if I was so lucky to be alive, I still don't think it would exist.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a criticism. There's a lot of things we aspire to that don't exist. I think the idea behind the book and the idea behind everybody that's pushing these ideas is we could be doing more for our customers. Why aren't we? Why
Yeah.
don't we adopt these habits and these practices? And to bring us back to our topic, I think one of the reasons why we aren't is because product teams are leading the change in our organizations, and the rest of our organizations are following us. And what happens is we get a little bit out over our skis. Hopefully that analogy works globally, right? Where if you get out over your skis, you fall on your face. That's the thing to know about this. So we get out over our skis a little bit. We're ahead of everybody else. And the rest of the organization is still geared around, I need to know what's coming and when. And I want to get into why that matters. Like the rest of the business does need to know what's coming and when. And the reason why they need to know that is because right now business, like your marketing team is running campaigns and planning campaigns around what is releasing when. And if they don't know what is releasing when, they can't run marketing campaigns. And if they can't run marketing campaigns, your sales team can't close business. And your sales team wants to know what's happening when, because they want to be able to tell a customer that is about to sign, but only if you have this feature, they want to say, oh, we'll have that feature in April of 2025, right? So like product teams have to understand this need. The CEO has to report to the board, this is what we're doing and why. The sales team has to be able to tell a prospect, we can meet that need by this timeline. The marketing team has to be able to market land campaigns. And when we say we can't tell you what's happening when, we basically tell the rest of the organization, we don't care about what you need. So the key here is we have to find a middle ground. We have to find a strategy that allows the rest of the organization to do their job and allows us to do our job.
Yeah.
And this is what the blog post is about. I think a lot of people, they want to rip out the date-based roadmap and replace it with a now, next, later roadmap and call it done and have the rest of the organization just deal with it. That is never going to work. Right?
Yeah.
We have to, it's continuous improvement. We have to iterate our way there. So in the blog post, what I wrote about is like, we have to recognize why teams need dates. So let's start with dates. Let's give them what they're asking for. And then let's gradually introduce them to these other ideas of like, hey, let's also communicate what problem we're solving for the customer and what outcome that might drive for our business.
Yeah.
Right? And if we just keep our date-based roadmap, we're still meeting the needs of the rest of the organization, but we add what problem we're solving for the customer, and we add what impact we're going to have for the business. Now we can start to change the narrative in the organization. When we're talking to our sales team, when we're being pulled into a prospect call, which we're always being doing, and we hear the sales rep talk about the feature, we can talk about the problem we're solving.
Yeah.
And what does that do in that sales conversation? The customer doesn't care about the feature. They care about their problem being solved. And the salesperson starts to see, oh, my customer just wants their problem solved. And we start to teach our sales teams to talk about problems, which, by the way, our best salespeople are already doing this. It's everybody else that needs to learn how to do it, right? And then same with marketing teams. When our marketing team is asking for help with a campaign and what's happening when, we can help them position it based on the problem that we're solving, not on the features that we're delivering. And by the way, that's better marketing because we know to market benefits and not features, right? But again, it's not that marketing and sales don't know how to do their jobs. It's that business has worked this way for 100 years and change is glacially slow. So if we add what we want to eventually be on the roadmap to the date-based roadmap, we start to teach them how to use those things. And this is actually why I love the now, next, later roadmap, because I think the now column should have solutions. It should be, this is what we're building and what is being delivered soon. And the next column should not, and the later column should not.
Amen.
And I think that's where we bridge this gap in the organization. We can tell you what we're going to deliver in the near term. Everything in the future is a little bit hazy.
And this is the crucial step that the now, next, later introduces. A lot of people think of the now, next, later as just 3 columns in which they can shove a whole bunch of dates or treat it like a Kanban of this is the order in which we're tackling things and they're all the same. But what the really crucial change is that the move away from a date-based roadmap to something that is time horizon based. And the time horizon is the now is the stuff that's right in front of you that you can see. And your article very much talks about how for teams like sales, and you might have mentioned support as well, marketing, some of these teams need to know what's coming out in the next release. And that's fair because what's coming out in the next release. If you know that, you can tell them, right? You're not hiding anything from them. If you have those dates, put it on the roadmap or communicate to them. You don't necessarily want to communicate that to customers because things change and that could get a bit messy. But for the most part, you should be able to communicate more or less what's happening right in front of you. But as you start looking further afield beyond and into the far yonder, the later column, we all know that's months away. You don't even know how big your team's going to be by next February, let alone how fast you're able to deliver. So why putting on dates there? We know that you're making it up. And so, go on.
What I think is funny is nobody hits the roadmap.
Nobody what?
Nobody hits the roadmap. Like
nobody.
Nobody delivers according to the dates of
exactly.
the roadmap. Like,
I think I saw a stat once about something like 20% of roadmaps are delivered. And I thought even that seems a little bit probably a bit high. I haven't seen that. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's like the organization is planning around a document that is pure fiction.
Yeah.
And this is actually, we can use this to our advantage, right? So if we just put a customer problem on the roadmap with the feature, and then we say, look, we're going to miss this date. Instead of saying we're going to miss this date, we can say we're either going to push the date out or we're going to reduce the scope of the feature, but still solve the problem.
Exactly.
Which do you prefer?
Yeah.
Now we're again starting to teach people about, it's not about the solution we're building, it's about solving this problem for the customer.
Yeah.
And we all know how to reduce scope to hit a deadline. We all know how to do that. Like, if we don't, we need to learn how to do that because that is a core product management skill, right? So like the challenge, we get into trouble with deadlines when the scope is fixed, the team is fixed, the deadline is fixed, and we run into an unknown. It blows up in our face, right?
One tip that I have, because a lot of people say, well, how do you reduce scope and still solve the problem? Well, think about it. Don't call it solve the problem. Call it solve for the problem area, right? Sometimes if you're thinking solve the problem, you're thinking of the single feature. You're still thinking too specific. You're putting a bunch of features on the roadmap and each problem is one particular little thing and you can't descope it. The problems on your roadmap should be bigger, chunkier problem areas that you're saying, well, we're going to tackle in this area, and then we're going to tackle in this area, and then we're going to tackle in this area. And if we do, that should take us more or less to this terrain over here.
Yeah.
And there should be room to say, well, once we're in this area, we could go big if we got lots of time and we're actually really good at it. We're going to like completely blast this area and we'll solve all these problems. But as you get there, you realize, oh, actually, we don't have this much time. We're just going to solve like 70% of the problems, or actually 50% or 20% of the problems. And that's what you're descoping. So you're still tackling that area, but you're not solving all of the problems that are in that problem area, which gives you more scope to play with.
Yeah, another way to play with scope is solve the problem for somebody, not for everybody.
That's a good way to put it.
Right?
I like that.
So
keeping that one,
we can say, look, in an ideal world, we can solve this for everybody, but I need X weeks. I have 2 weeks, so I'm going to solve it for this slice of our customer base, who, by the way, is waiting for this feature before they buy.
Yeah.
Right? And so we meet the needs of sales. on the timeline that they need it,
Yeah.
but we're not on a death march where we're building way too much.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes this work. Product teams build way too much, way too soon.
Yeah. Yeah, it's too easy to say, well, while we're in there, we're just going to solve everything in this problem
Yep.
area and we create this masterful chunk of work and then put it out there. And then once they deliver it, the marketing's like, great, we've done this giant thing. And no one ever hears about it again because it's all gone out as one release. It goes, whoop, there we
Yeah. Okay. Let's
go.
dig into
Next thing.
marketing a little bit because I think this is really key.
Okay, go on.
We have like product teams have to be careful. We can't tell our marketing people how to do their job, but we can
Go
influence.
on. We can
So,
tell everybody how to do their job sometime.
I mean, I kind of
We've been
want
known
to,
to
but
do
I know
so.
better. Let's say that I work at a company, and I've worked at many companies like this. Let's say I work at a company where the marketing team runs 100% of their campaigns around code releases. This is very common.
Yeah.
And in this situation, a roadmap with dates is critical because it takes time to plan campaigns and to get everything queued up and to do a big launch date. It costs money, and we want to make sure that we hit that date or we're going to lose money. Okay, great. Support that. So meet them where they are. That's how they work. Support that. I would do this. I would say, okay, we're going to hit your date. And 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever the timeline is, after that date, I want us to run a second campaign. I'm going to find you customers who are using the product, and we're going to run a campaign around the success our customers are having with that release.
I like that.
That campaign is going to be way more effective than the, hey, we launched something campaign. And what's going to happen? Your marketing team is going to see that and experience that. And by the way, your feature better work or you're not going to have customers to support that marketing campaign. So this all starts with good discovery, right? If you know your feature is going to work with your marketing team to do a follow-on campaign that is about customer success.
I like that.
And they will quickly learn those campaigns perform better. They're going to want to do more of them. They're going to be less dependent on your release plans. And they're going to be more excited about, tell me when we have a customer who's using this. And it gets you away from delivery dates.
I love that. Gives it a proper 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
My top tip for getting marketing on board with the idea of moving away from giving hard dates is to separate your hard launch from your soft launch, right? Because with marketing, one of the problems is that they have to plan. Sometimes it takes weeks to plan this big campaign. They've got ad campaigns going out, billboards going up, and they've got money being spent on this thing. And all of this is hinging on the design and product and development team getting this code out on time, which unfortunately is a bit of a dicey project. We don't know how much is going to be built or how long it's going to take or whether it's going to land on this week or the other week, which is difficult, right? Because you don't know exactly what it's going to be like until you actually get in there and it's done. And so they're asking, hey, what week is this going to launch so we can do the big thing? And you don't know. And this causes tension because you're stacking two projects up against each other. And if one slips, the other one loses all its value. Well, what you need to do is you need to get the development project up to the point that it can do a soft launch and it gets itself put into some sort of feature flag mode, a beta mode, some sort of mode where it's launched, the development team is now hands off and says, we've done it, we've built it to the point that we're happy with it, and hands it over to the marketing team and to support and sales and other people can see it. It's used internally, perhaps with a beta group of customers, the product team can play with it. But really crucially, marketing has their hands on it so they can go and use it for their marketing materials. They can build out customer testimonials. They can get videos of people using it. They have pictures of it actually working as opposed to designs that probably changed from the original Figma files or whatever it was. So they've actually got this final functional product, and then they can plan the biggest, bangest launch they want. If they want 4 weeks to do it or 4 months, however long they want, they can do that. And then their campaign goes out and there's zero risk that this thing doesn't work on the day that it's out there because all it takes is to flip a switch and it's on and they can do their big campaign in the sky or whatever it is.
We see Apple does this extraordinarily well. Every June, Apple makes announcements about what's coming in September at their developer conference. They always announce this thing is coming. Now hear from this partner or look at this app that's going to be available, meaning they've already partnered with developers. People are already using it long before they announce it. And then even so, it's still not coming for another 3 months. Right? So like, it's not that we can't do marketing around launches. We shouldn't be doing marketing around first release dates. We want real people using it, whether that's our employees, whether it's close in customers, whether it's design partners, it doesn't matter who, right? But the idea is by the time we're publicly making a big to-do about it, we need to know it already works. And
Yeah.
we need to know who it works for. And we need to include that as part of our marketing.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. So what about that's marketing? We've got them happy with this. They're on board. What about
It's
sales?
that simple. You're done.
Done.
Um, Sales is a little bit harder.
Mhm.
Sales is hard because first of all, we have to think about this from a sales mindset. And Rich Miranoff writes a lot about this. I think he does an extraordinarily good job of writing about other people's perspectives in the organization so that you're in a better position to influence. So if you're not familiar with his blog, I believe it's called Product Bites. That's with a
Yeah.
Y.
Product bites with a Y. Yep.
Yeah, he's top notch. I'm going to just toot his horn a little bit. Okay, so let's talk about salespeople for a second. A salesperson is motivated to close the deal that's in front of them. That is their job. It's not to worry about does my product service this need 100%? They're looking for, does the product service the need enough that I can close the business and hopefully get the renewal later, right? So of course, they're trying to get creative with, if I understand your needs, how do I use my existing product to address those needs? Then they run into gaps. Like, of course, the customer has a need that the product currently can't address. So what do they want to do? They want to go to the product team and say, build me this feature so that I can tell the prospect sitting in front of me right now that, yes, we can meet that need, sign the contract. This is why we get overwhelmed with feature requests. Our job is not to build those feature requests. Our job is to do the work to understand, why does that customer need that feature? What are they trying to do?
Which is
And then
discovery.
do that with 100 other customers that have a similar need, even though their feature request looks a little different. And instead of building the 100 individual feature requests, we need to build the one thing that meets those 100 customers' needs.
Yeah.
But this causes stress for our salespeople because the salespeople don't want to have to explain why we didn't build feature A, we built feature B instead, because we know better what you need than you do, customer. That puts our salesperson in a tough situation. So we have to support the salesperson when they do that. We have to say, look, we know your customer asked for feature A. Let me sit down with you and walk you through why feature B actually meets their need better, which means we need to fully understand that customer's need, which means we probably need to be involved in those sales conversations.
Yeah.
And then we need to equip that salesperson, not we go in and be the hero, which is what a lot of product people want to do. We need to equip that salesperson to be the hero in front of their own prospect. Where they are 100% convinced that the feature B is better and they're ready and able to explain it to that customer.
Yep, absolutely. And
And
here's
feature B better be better.
And here's the reality is sometimes feature B isn't better. Sometimes the salesperson is dragged in a client who feature A or feature B isn't the right solution for them, right? It needs to have feature A for them to close this deal. It needs to have feature X, Y, and Z and all these other things. Sometimes they drag in clients who aren't actually a good fit. And this is actually one of the problems is that you have this tension where there's always this one extra feature that's needed. And ultimately, it comes down to finding this right balance in that the salespeople should be out there as almost like discovery agents. They're finding out which features are going to bring the product forward, right? If they hear one feature A, that might be an interesting thing. If they hear feature A from like 10 different clients, cool, that's really good information, right? You want to hear that as a product person. And then, yeah, build feature A, that's going to solve the problem. Or help them understand how feature B is going to solve that problem. But sometimes they start asking for feature X or feature Y or things like this. It doesn't mean it's your job to build these features. Sometimes you need to point them to what your ideal customer profile is, work with them on who the ideal customer is, and help them understand as to you are building a product that looks like this for this type of customer. They need to do their job and find customers who look more like your existing customers rather than going for the customers who sometimes it's the easy ones who've come to them saying, yeah, we'll buy if it only does this one thing. We'll buy if it only does this one other thing. And unfortunately, you can't be a business if you're going to build for customers who don't want your product.
These things are also not independent because the more your marketing team uses customer success stories to market,
Hmm.
the more you get better leads for your sales team.
Yeah.
So if I hear a customer tell a story about how they used the product and why it worked for them, and that story resonates with me, I'm a way better lead than
Yeah.
if I hear like, here's a vague feature list that I'm going to interpret however I want
Yeah.
and try to shoehorn it into my needs. And
Yeah.
so a lot of this, and I know for product, like a lot of product managers might be listening to this and just be like, my job is not to fix sales and marketing. Like, I don't know what to do with this. It's not your job to fix sales and marketing. But if we want to be effective in our organizations, we have to understand where sales is coming from. We have to understand where
Yeah.
marketing is coming from. And we can make their jobs easier in a way that makes our jobs easier,
Yeah.
right? So we can nudge the more we talk about customer problems and business outcomes and less about specific features, the
Yeah.
easier everybody's job gets.
Yeah. You want to know one of my favorite tactics is using the way that sales works to help convince your leaders that you don't need to work towards dates. So your salesperson, for example, doesn't have to make a commitment up front as to how many or which customers are going to land on which dates. Just like
Yeah,
you shouldn't have to commit to which features are going to be launched on which dates.
this was the analogy I used in my blog post. So we do ask, like, I think I was talking to somebody who, like, they said their CEO said, I can't just give you an outcome. No other part of my organization works this way. And I was like, is that really true? That's not really true. We give sales reps quotas. What's a quota? It's an outcome they're trying to reach. Now, a sales rep has to show progress throughout the quarter towards that outcome. And usually that progress is things like, how many sales calls did you make? How many emails did you send? How many opportunities are you working? What's your percent likelihood that you're going to close those? Right? So we have visibility into, are they on progress towards making their quota? What they don't do is say, I'm going to close this deal on this date. I'm going to close this deal on this date. I'm going to close this deal on this date. Because everybody knows that would be impossible.
Hmm.
Okay, now let's look at the analogy for product teams. We do ask them, even when we give them an outcome, we still ask them to tell us what feature is delivering on what date. That's not, we should recognize that's equally impossible.
Yeah.
We should say, look, we're working on this portfolio of things that are in discovery. We think this one has a percent chance of succeeding. This one has a percent chance of succeeding. This one has a percent chance of succeeding. And by the end of the quarter, we expect to hit our outcome.
Yeah.
Now, just like sales reps don't always hit our quotas, I don't expect product teams to always hit their outcome, but we're managing a portfolio of risk just like salespeople are managing a portfolio of risk.
And we're running experiments just like salespeople, right?
Yep.
Salespeople experiments. So it's picking up the phone and doing emails and doing their stuff, right? And a lot of their
Yep.
experiments fail, right? They get hung up on. They don't know which of their people, which of their prospects are going to buy. They just know if they keep hammering the phones and hammering emails, someone's going to buy. That's how it's worked in the previous quarters and previous years. And it's probably going to continue working as long as they follow their sales process. Well, we don't
Yep.
know which of our experiments are going to fail or succeed. If we did, we'd just do the ones that are going to succeed. Instead, we just know that if we follow a process of doing experiments and focusing on the right sort of areas, we know that some of them, enough of them, are going to succeed for us
Yep.
to more or less hit our numbers because it worked
And
previous quarters.
it's the same in marketing. There's a quote, I think it comes from like a 1950s era advertising firm that was like, I know 50% of my ad spend is working. I just don't know which 50%.
Exactly
Right?
that.
So it's like, okay, great. We have an outcome, drive a certain number of leads, get a certain amount of traffic. You have a bucket of money, spread
Yeah.
it out, make a bunch of bets. We
Yeah.
don't know ahead of time which ones are going to win. We just know if we make enough bets and we learn from our losing bets that we will build a track record of enough bets winning.
Yes.
So it's
Exactly that.
funny that we like deal with this uncertainty and ambiguity really well in marketing and sales. We just hold product teams to a different standard. And
Yeah.
it's
Exactly.
because features feel concrete and
Yeah.
certain, but we're recognizing they're not. We get
Yeah.
90+% failure rate.
And for people who feel like everybody else is already there, remember, not everyone is there. Not everyone has that checklist. Everyone is working their way towards that way of working. We're seeing some companies who are working this way. Other companies are still fighting these arguments. Somebody had a question in the Q&A that touches on a really interesting subject area, which is this one always comes up as a hot topic. Okay, what about companies who have budgets? They work out their financial budget for the year and then allot it based on what you get done for the year. Have
Yep.
you ever helped and coached companies through this?
Yeah, same idea. Same exact idea of what you would do on a roadmap. So you're in your annual budgeting meeting. Everybody's horse trading their favorite features. When they're doing that, just add a customer problem statement and a business outcome to each feature. Just start to build awareness of why are we making these decisions? Because we're trying to solve this customer problem, because we're trying to drive this business outcome.
Yeah.
The reason why you want to do that is because in August, when you realize you're not going to deliver that feature, or you're still on March's features, which is more likely the case, you can start to talk about, I can catch up if we solve this customer problem in this other way, because it's faster, right? So when we don't really have to change anything about our organizations. That's the beauty of this strategy. All we have to do is add more information to the artifacts we're already using. So in annual planning, add a customer problem, add a business outcome.
Yeah.
On your roadmap, add a customer problem, add a business outcome. Because I guarantee it, you are not going to hit that roadmap. You are not going to deliver all those projects. And your company already knows this because you never have in the history of time. But by adding a customer problem and an outcome to those documents, when you're on track to miss, you now have more flexibility for catching up, for still meeting the customer problem, for still driving the business outcome. And the reality is what your company cares about is the customer problem, the business outcome, not the feature. They just don't have the language to talk about it that way. So we can give them the language.
And speaking of speaking the business's language, so Mana in their question here talked about a particular thing. At the end of the year, you get audited on what you've done with the money. I actually love this because this is speaking their language, but this creates an opportunity for you to be able to retroactively look back and say, well, let's say our team cost $1 million or pounds or euros or whatever to run for the year. And so we spent this quarter working on solving this problem area and this quarter working on this problem area. And in this problem area, you can see that we moved it from here to here. So it cost us $250,000 and we got from here to here. That was the value that we drove for this. So you should be able to tie your results back to the efforts that you put into it by taking the budget and retroactively applying it. Budgets are easy retroactively. Budgets are a lot harder when you're looking forward, particularly if you don't have a fixed team size. But if you are able to fix that team size, you can make guesstimates on how much your team is going to cost you, and therefore make guesses at how much it's going to cost to go tackle an area ahead. If you're saying, hey, we're going to tackle this problem ahead of us on the next column, we're going to spend $250,000 going from here to where we think is going to be there if we tackle this area. That's what our goal is.
What I love about this too is a lot of product teams say, why wouldn't we just build it? It's only going to take a week. Well, that week is tens of thousands of dollars, right? So we can't just think about it as it's just a week. We're spending tens of thousands of dollars during that week to pay for all our salaries, to pay for all our time, to pay. And remember, it's not just that week, it's the rest of the life of that software that we're going to maintain and bug fix and support. And I think it's actually really important that teams build this awareness of what does it actually cost to build these features so that we get better at these trade-offs. And I think that also helps our leaders. Like, okay, you made a decision probably for some companies, August, for most companies, probably November, when we're doing our annual planning of we're going to spend $250K on this. Okay, well, we found a way to just spend $50K on this. And we changed the scope because we think it'll still solve the problem. Now you look like a hero. You just saved the company $200K, right? So the more we can learn this language, the better we can help drive this change. And I want to highlight this moment because I know we have like 7 minutes left. There is something every single person on this call can do right now, like literally right now, to help their organization move in the right direction. And that is look at your roadmap, your date-based old school roadmap, and just add what customer problem is each thing solving. That's it. Just do that. And then when you're done with that and you're ready for the next step, I'm going to recommend is just add a business outcome. Why does this matter to your company? And if you need help with either of those things, I'm going to tell you, like if you don't know what your business outcomes are because your leader did not describe them, I have a 1-minute video. It is 1 minute long. That's how much time you need to invest. You can find it at videos.producttalk.org. I might even be able to pull up a link if I'm super fat savvy here. That talks about how to identify your business outcomes from your product's revenue model. So you don't need to wait for your leaders to define business outcomes for you. You literally can do this yourself. And you can look at the feature and just use common sense and reasoning. Why does my company want me to build this feature? Oh, because they think it's going to increase retention. Great. That's the outcome. And I'm now going to put customer problems and outcomes on my roadmap and just see what that does. And anytime you're asked about a feature, talk about the customer problem, talk about the outcome. It literally is that simple.
Excellent. I run what I call the so what check. So I see a lot of roadmaps. I run what I call roadmap clinics, which is like people bring their roadmaps to me and I help transform them into now, next, later formats and whatnot. Or people show me whatever they've put together so far. And I run a so what check. And I should be able to read your roadmap and go, so what? Now, I don't know anything about your business, but I should be able to more or less look at it and by the end of it go, okay, so what does this mean for your business? And if I'm not seeing something that says, oh, that sounds like a customer problem or something that's going to solve something for your business, if I'm not seeing how it's tied back by the end of the year, it doesn't, I say, so what? Like, where is this? How is this tied back together? Everything on your roadmap should have some sort of, you should be able to say by the end of the year, what's it actually done for your business? And you should be able to be, it should be able to be something that's human readable, as in you show to somebody who doesn't know your business and they go, oh, right, yeah, I can see what's going on here. I see so many roadmaps that are just a bunch of jargon and features and a bunch of stuff. And I can say, okay, so if you're building that and then that and that and that and that, so what? You have a bunch of new features.
Yep.
What does that actually get you? And they go, oh, well, that's going to help us do this and this. Cool, put that on there, which is
Yeah,
exactly
exactly.
the thing that you're trying to get them to do.
This is probably my next favorite social media argument, which is it's not my job to drive business outcomes. It's my job to serve the customer.
Nice.
Okay, well, why do you get a paycheck? Right? Like, we have to think this through. Like, okay, your job is to serve the customer. That is true. But if you don't also serve the business, there will
Yeah.
literally be no money to pay your paycheck. And I think a lot of people, we're living in an era where there's like a theme or current or narrative of like capitalism is bad. And I think that's what's driving this. And I will be the first to tell you there are a lot of things that capitalism has created that I think is awful and greedy and horrible. But there's also a lot of good that has been created by capitalism. All you have to do is go to North Korea and see an alternative. Not to get too political here. But here's the thing. If you work at a company, if you take a paycheck from a company, your job is to create value for the business. Full stop.
Yeah.
That is your job. Ideally, you are doing that by also creating value for the customer. And what people miss is if you don't create business value, if you just create customer value, you will lose your job.
Yeah.
Your product will probably be shut down because it is not sustainable for a business to run a product that does not create value for the business. That is the hard reality of business. And it's like, I hear myself saying this and I imagine some people are being like, that's so obvious. Why do you even have to tell us this? There is a large percentage. I can't put a number on it, but it's non-trivial because I see it pop up every day. People argue, it is not my job to deliver business outcomes.
Oh, no.
It is your job to deliver business outcomes. I really like the key here. A lot of companies ask us to deliver business outcomes at the cost of the customer. Our job is to make sure we're delivering business outcomes while serving the customer. That's how we align those things. That's how we create customer value. So I just had to go on a little mini rant about that.
No, and I love that. I love that. And the way to think about this, most companies, like 99+%, are going to need to be customer aligned with their outcomes. The very few companies who don't need to be aligned, if you're a monopoly, and honestly, it doesn't matter whether you're serving the customer or not, but most companies are going to need to be aligned in that way. But put it this way, if you were truly customer driven, only doing what the customers wanted, well, why not make the product free? They would love that.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be great for the business.
And I will say, again, I'm bringing in some of the extremes of social media. I know a lot of us get this, but it's especially after tech, it went through some really tough times in the last couple of years. So I want to acknowledge that. And I think that's where a lot of this narrative is coming from. I think people miss the fact that like literally your paycheck depends upon your business making money. Yeah. So it's not evil for your business to make money. That's what puts food on your table.
Yeah.
Right. And we have to bring more of that commercial mindset that business mindset to our work. It doesn't mean we have to do it at the cost of the customer. In fact, I hope one of my goals with continuous discovery habits was to show how we can do it in a way that's good for our customer.
Yeah. Excellent. Well said. All right. So just a few things to wrap up here. So we've got more on this. We have I know that there's going to be some people here who are fired up to go tell their team to get on board with a now, next, later roadmap. Our team here at ProdPad has created a deck. It's a Google Slides that you can take back to your team. It has the notes, the speaker notes already in there to guide you through how to convince your team to get on board with the now, next, later and get away from their timeline roadmap ways of working. Next up, we do have another webinar guest coming up. That's going to be Adam Thomas. He's going to be talking about the 5 deadly sins of strategy on August 15th. So save that in your calendar. Same time, same place, the one. And then finally, just a big thank you from us at ProdPad. By all means, jump in, start your trial. If you want to start your own now, next, later roadmap, get in there and give it a try. And in the meantime, huge thank you to you, Teresa. This has been an absolute blast. I've absolutely loved having a chat with you today. Thanks for answering our questions and going on rants with me about this.
Absolutely. Thanks for humoring my rants. I appreciate it.
Excellent. This has been good fun. Thank you, everybody, for all the chats. Been keeping an eye on the questions and the chat here today, but there's been a lot, but really appreciate it. And see you all here back next time as well. All right. Bye for now.